Have you ever wondered why certain moments seem to find you at the exact second you're on the edge of something you can't even name? Why certain words resonate as if they were spoken just for you, even in the middle of the world's noise? They're not coincidences. They're callings. Silent signs that appear when your mind, even when tired, starts to open up to what's beyond the surface. Maybe it started with a subtle discomfort, that feeling that life is going by, and yet something's missing. You look around, and even though everything seems to be in order, there's a restlessness deep down, a shapeless question that keeps pulsing inside you. That's the beginning, the invisible beginning of the end of the illusion. There's a kind of knowledge that can't be found in manuals or ready-made formulas. It doesn't show up in classrooms or packed conferences. It's a kind of wisdom that only reveals itself when you're ready to see. And being ready here doesn't mean understanding everything. It means feeling the calling, feeling that something is off, even when no one else notices. This knowledge was preserved by a few, passed on through symbols, myths, languages that only the initiated could decipher. Because it wasn't just a set of ideas, it was an experience, a shift in state, a kind of revelation that changed the way a person saw themselves and, as a result, changed everything around them. But it wasn't always welcome. For centuries, those who dared say that the human mind had power over matter were silenced. Those who spoke of reality as a reflection of consciousness were treated as heretics, lunatics, or subversives, and there was a reason for that. A reason much deeper than just ignorance. This knowledge was dangerous, not because it caused harm, but because it threatened the structure of everything that keeps people on autopilot. Because if you find out that the power to transform your life isn't in external rules or ready-made formulas, but inside your own mind, then no one can control you anymore. That's when everything starts to change. But this transformation doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with applause. It starts subtly, with a restlessness, with an uncomfortable question, with a moment of silence in which you realize, maybe everything I was taught is incomplete. In that moment, something moves inside you. An invisible structure begins to crack. It's not physical pain. It's a kind of internal collapse, as if the pillars that held up your worldview were shaking, and that tremor, though scary, is necessary. Because before healing begins, the illusion has to fall apart. The ancient wisdom knew that. The initiated were led through rituals where they confronted their own fears, their deepest beliefs, their most hidden memories, not to suffer, but to see. To see what was behind everything that made them act, think, and feel a certain way. This process was so intense that in many traditions it was called a symbolic death. The death of the old self, not of the body, but of the mask, the role, the character you learned to play in order to be accepted by the world. And what was born in its place? A new way of seeing, a new way of listening, a new kind of presence, something quiet, but incredibly powerful. The awareness that the outer world has always been a mirror, a reflection of what you carry inside, and often hide even from yourself. But this awareness doesn't come as an answer. It comes as a question that echoes inside like a drumbeat. What if everything I live, everything I feel, everything I repeat is just the effect of something that happens long before life actually begins? This question, simple and direct, is the doorway, and it's right at this point that we start to touch what the ancients called the source of imbalance. But before we reveal what's truly at the origin of it all, you need to see the most ignored detail of all, the blind spot where most people fail, even when they're trying to change. Have you ever felt like you woke up out of place? It's not something you can explain with words. It's subtle, almost invisible, a discomfort that shows up before you even open your eyes. It's not quite pain, not sadness, but a strange sensation, like something is missing, something essential. As if part of you knows you should be living a different reality, but you just can't remember what it is. That's the first symptom, and most people ignore it because it comes in silence, disguised as laziness, boredom, a fleeting lack of motivation. You get up, shake off the feeling, drink a strong coffee, and push it under the mental rug, telling yourself, it's just another rough day. But what you don't realize is that this slight discomfort is the start of a crack in the system. It's the first sign that the mind is beginning to collapse from within. And then, the second symptom shows up, even more disguised. You catch yourself scrolling through your phone for too long, trying to distract yourself, but nothing holds your attention. You start a video, skip to the next one, start a book, close it in 2 minutes. Everything feels shallow. Everything feels dull. Even the things that used to excite you now feel distant, colorless. You're there, but at the same time, you're not. It's like you're present in your body, but absent in your awareness. Like your soul hit the pause button and left just an automated version of you running the script of the day. This disconnection isn't obvious. It grows slowly, without any big signs, until suddenly, you start getting angry more easily, irritated by small things, impatient with the people closest to you. Your emotions become more reactive, more unstable, and you don't even know why. All of this is part of a cycle. An ancient cycle that the old ones already observed carefully. They knew the fall doesn't start with the body. It starts with the field, with the vibration, with the mind out of balance. But since no one taught us how to identify these invisible signs, we only react when the pain has already reached the physical, when it becomes a symptom, a diagnosis, a crisis. And then we think it started there. But it didn't. When the body gets sick, it's just the last one to scream. Before that, the soul already whispered. The mind already begged. The energy field already gave a warning. But because all of that is invisible to the eyes, we learn to ignore it. Or worse, we learn to normalize it. We live in a world that thinks it's normal to be anxious all the time. That thinks it's common to live stressed. That considers it routine to feel exhausted, distracted, disconnected. But that's not normal. That's a symptom. And the truth is, this imbalance doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's the result of a pattern, a silent cycle that begins with a single thought, a thought that passes quickly through your mind but leaves a trace. A thought like, I can't take this anymore, or nothing ever changes, or even, maybe I'm not enough. That thought creates a micro-emotional state, a small vibrational wave that, if repeated, starts shaping your inner environment. And when this repeats day after day, that small wave turns into a tide. You start being carried by it without even noticing. And little by little, you become someone who wakes up already in defense mode, with a tight chest, with a heavy gaze, with a racing mind. The world starts to look gray, and the body, which is just a mirror of the mind, begins to express that pain that was once only vibrational. Insomnia, fatigue, frequent headaches, gut issues, muscle tension, weakened immune system. These are the most visible symptoms, but they're not the source. They're just the surface of a much deeper ocean, an ocean made of thoughts, emotions, and traumas that have piled up over years, or maybe even lifetimes. And this is exactly where the danger lies. Because if you try to treat only the symptom, ignoring the invisible source, healing is never real. It's like painting over a cracked wall without fixing the structure behind it. Sooner or later, the crack comes back. And sometimes it comes back even deeper, more painful, more stubborn. That's why so many people live in cycles of getting better and relapsing. because they're treating the reflection, not the root. But this root isn't easy to reach. It's hidden behind a layer of noise, of distractions, of escape mechanisms. The modern mind has been trained to run from silence, to avoid inner confrontation. Whenever the emptiness shows up, we rush to fill it. With food, with social media, with work, with anything that keeps us from facing what's trying to come up. But true healing doesn't happen when you run from the void. It happens when you face it. Because the void is actually the space where transformation begins. It's the gap between who you thought you were and who you're about to become. It's the fertile ground where the seeds of the new begin to sprout. But for that, you have to be willing to look, to listen, to feel. And that's exactly where most people freeze. Because between the first invisible symptom and total collapse, there's a choice that almost no one realizes they're making. And it's this silent choice that might be stopping your mind from starting the healing process. Because most of the time, you don't even notice that you're choosing. You wake up, think something you've always thought, feel what you've always felt, and act the same way you did yesterday. Without realizing it, you've already stepped back into the same loop. The mind, by nature, looks for the most familiar path, and recurring thought becomes trail. Like a trail in the woods that forms over time every time someone walks that way. The difference is that this trail is mental, invisible to the eyes but totally real to your system. And when you think the same thing day after day, that trail gets deeper, it starts taking shape. The brain releases the same neurotransmitters, the same hormones, and the body, like an obedient orchestra, responds. Subtle contractions, shallow breathing, altered heart rate. The chemistry changes, the vibration changes, and the field around the body starts reflecting that pattern. But the scariest part of it all is that even if you want to change, even if you try to think differently, that old path is still there. It pulls you back. Because it's familiar, because it's already solidified. And what started as a random thought has now become a complete circuit, a cycle that feeds itself. And the more you repeat it, the more real it becomes. It's like being in a mental prison with the doors wide open, but not realizing you can walk out. Because the pattern is so repeated, so normalized, that you believe it's part of who you are. But it's not. It's just a program, a encoded, a structure built from beliefs, past experiences, and unconscious repetitions. And this is where the real enemy lives. It's not out there. It's not the government. It's not society. It's not other people. It's that silent pattern you keep feeding without realizing. An enemy that lives inside you, that uses your own voice to repeat the same internal narratives, that shows up as truth, but is really just leftover residue from something that should have been released a long time ago. Phrases like, "I'm not good enough," "Nothing ever works out for me," "I always mess everything up," seem like ordinary thoughts, but they're reversed mantras. Mental spells you cast on yourself every day, and the body, always obedient, responds to those commands. It starts molding itself around that frequency. Your immunity drops. Your sleep gets off track. Your hormones get thrown out of balance. Your vitality fades. And that's how the mind becomes form. Thoth warned about this millennia ago, not in medical terms, but in vibrational language. The mind is the origin of form. That means everything you see, feel, and experience in the dense world of the body and matter is just an expression of something that started in the subtle. Form is the echo. The cause is in the mind. Modern medicine, with all its advances, is just now beginning to explore this territory. It gives it complex names: psychoneuroimmunology, epigenetics, psychosomatic response. But the core is the same. What you think and feel directly affects your body. And more, it affects the field around it, the invisible space that connects all things. So why is this so overlooked? Because acknowledging it requires responsibility. It requires admitting that, on some level, you're creating the reality you live in, not with guilt, but with awareness. Because if you created a pattern, that means you can also dismantle it. But the system would rather have you believe otherwise, that you're just a victim, that there's no way out, because a conscious being is an uncontrollable being. So the cycle continues. You feel bad. You think you need a distraction. You reach for your phone, sugar, shopping. You get temporary relief, but the pain comes back. And what seemed like a solution was actually just reinforcing the pattern. That's how the silent enemy gets stronger with every tiny unconscious decision. With every thought that slips by but carries the same old vibrational signature. But what if you could access the exact point where that pattern starts forming? That point where the pattern begins is the most ignored, because it doesn't show up as a crisis or an obvious trauma. It hides inside your most ordinary routines, in the way you wake up, the way you respond to a message, the voice you use when you talk to yourself after making a mistake. That's the labyrinth. Yes, you try to change. You sign up for courses, repeat positive affirmations, start a meditation, or a new practice. For a few minutes, you even feel something shifting, a bit of relief, a bit of hope, a higher vibration. But then, without realizing it, you slide back into the old state. A piece of bad news, an emotional trigger, an uncomfortable memory, and boom, you're back in the same cycle. This is the cruelest cycle because it gives you the impression that you're making progress, but it always pulls you back, like you're stuck on a never-ending treadmill. You walk, try hard, sweat, but you're not moving forward. And it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's because you're still operating within the same vibrational field. You think positively for 10 minutes, but for the other 23 hours and 50 minutes, you're vibrating scarcity, fear, or anger. And it's no use trying to change your life with a lit candle and a pretty phrase while your whole field is still locked in the same unconscious pattern. The body doesn't respond to what you want. It responds to what you vibrate. And what you vibrate is the result of what repeats the most, not what you try to force every now and then. It's like trying to purify an entire ocean with a single drop of light. The intention is noble, but the vibrational force is still being dominated by the shadow operating in silence. And that shadow isn't evil. It's repetition. It's a pattern. It's habit. It's what was learned, copied, absorbed. That's why most healing attempts fail, because people might start off with energy, but they go right back to mentally feeding on the same toxic content. And then the doubt starts. Does this stuff even work? Does this vibration thing even make sense? Maybe it's all just an illusion. And just like that, the labyrinth grows stronger. Because the very act of questioning starts feeding the frequency of disbelief, and disbelief sabotages every attempt at transformation. The ancients knew this. That's why they said true knowledge could only be passed on inside temples, not because of elitism, but for protection. Because when a powerful seed is planted in contaminated soil, it doesn't grow. And worse, the seed gets blamed. That's why so many people give up the path before they see any results. They're trying to plant a new frequency in soil still trapped in old pain. The vibrational labyrinth is invisible, but it has structure. It's made of thoughts, emotions, and habits. And each of these elements carries a specific vibration. You may not see it, but the universe feels it. Because the universe doesn't respond to your spoken language. It responds to your energetic language, and that language doesn't lie. You can say you've forgiven, but if your body still tenses up when you remember, the vibration is resentment. You can say you believe in love, but you close off when someone gets close. The vibration is fear. You can say you trust the universe, but you panic when the plan changes. The vibration is control, and the body records all of it. It becomes a reflection of your dominant frequency. That's why healing isn't just mental, it's vibrational. It needs to reach the root of the cycle. It has to deactivate the pattern before it manifests again, and that requires continuous awareness. Attention to the now, true presence. But there is a way out. A code. Something the ancients didn't write down but taught through symbols, gestures, and inner practices. Something that didn't begin with the mind, but from a subtler place. A point that can't be reached through logic or force. A point that has to be accessed with a different kind of key. And the most important part, that key is already with you. This key that you carry, maybe without even knowing it, starts to reveal itself when you understand what the ancient masters called encoded emotion. They knew that reality isn't shaped by random thoughts or vague wishes, but by deep emotional impressions tied to internal images with precise structure. In ancient Egypt, the initiation temples weren't just places of study, but of vibrational practice. Disciples didn't learn from books, they learned through experience. And one of the first practices was this, creating an internal image so real, so rich in detail, that the body couldn't tell whether it was a memory or something actually happening. But this wasn't just basic visualization. It wasn't like imagining a beautiful scene and hoping something mystical would happen. It was a technical process, almost scientific, even if spiritual. It involved 3 required elements. First, sensory detail. The created image had to engage the senses clearly. It wasn't enough to visualize a flower. You had to feel the texture of the petals, the temperature of the wind around you, the subtle sounds accompanying the moment. The brain reacts to this. It believes something real is happening. The mental field starts emitting a coherent frequency. Then, authentic emotion. This is what activated the code. But here's the catch. It couldn't be a forced emotion. It wasn't enough to fake happiness or try to feel gratitude. You had to find, within your own memory or intention, a real point of joy, relief, or love. The initiates practiced this for days until they could make the heart genuinely vibrate, because the body only responds to emotions that are truly felt, not made up. And finally, total absence of doubt. This was the hardest part, because the mind loves to sabotage. It says, this is ridiculous. This won't work. You're just fooling yourself. And if that noise entered the practice, the code was corrupted. The ancients taught, either you believe like a child believes in play, with total surrender, or you activate nothing. Doubt breaks the vibrational flow. When these 3 elements came together, something extraordinary happened. The body started responding as if it were already happening in the physical world. Breathing changed, posture shifted, hormones adjusted, the vibration shifted instantly, and over time, the practitioner's energy field began to attract external experiences that matched this new frequency. The ancients didn't call this a miracle. They called it alignment. The outer world, according to them, was just a reflection of the inner state. So if the inner changed, the reflection couldn't stay the same. But notice, this practice required silence, focus, repetition, and above all, pure intention. It wasn't to control others or gain advantages. It was to align the being with a new reality. That's what most people don't get today. They want results without roots. They want healing without reprogramming the emotion. But without encoded emotion, there's no lasting change. The energy always goes back to the old pattern, and this technique, as powerful as it is, was only the first step. What came next, at the deeper levels of initiation, was so sensitive it was kept secret for centuries. Because when this practice was combined with a second element unknown to most, The effects were no longer just internal. They began to directly influence the collective field around the practitioner. This second layer, only accessible to the most prepared initiates, didn't involve just creating a vivid mental image or feeling momentary gratitude. It was something deeper, subtler, and more powerful: the internal command. A silent code that doesn't use words, but consistent emotional frequencies that reprogram the entire body's functioning. The body isn't dumb. It doesn't respond to fleeting desires or shallow promises. It obeys rooted emotional patterns. Every time you feel something with intensity and consistency, the body interprets that as an order. It reads emotion as a direct command. It doesn't matter if it was intentional or unconscious. For the body, feeling is direction. That's why so many people stay stuck in endless cycles, not because they want to, but because they send the same command every day without realizing it. They wake up feeling anxious, walk around in fear, react with frustration. And the body, faithful to what it interprets, starts adapting to it. Hormonal glands adjust the chemistry. The nervous system reinforces the circuits. Posture shapes itself around the dominant emotion. Everything inside you starts orbiting around that frequency. But the most surprising part is, it doesn't just affect the body. The field around you responds too. The ancients called this the field of vital influence. Today, science is getting closer to that with studies on heart coherence and the electromagnetic fields emitted by the human body. They've shown that the heart generates a field that expands several feet outward, and that field changes depending on the emotional state. Gratitude and presence generate harmonic patterns, fear and anger, chaotic ones. Now imagine that being broadcasted constantly, for days, months, years. It's like you're transmitting an emotional radio station to the universe non-stop. And the universe, like a perfect echo, sends back experiences that match that frequency, not because it judges you, but because it resonates. Vibration attracts vibration, and that's the hidden game few people realize. But when you change the emotional command the body receives, something shifts in a chain reaction. You start to feel different. That changes how you breathe, how you move, how you see the world. Your thoughts adjust. Your decisions change. Small everyday details realign. And that's when the visible magic begins. People show up. Opportunities open. Obstacles dissolve. All of that because the body stopped obeying the old invisible manual and started responding to a new frequency installed by the real commander, you. But here's the most overlooked point by people trying to make this shift consciously. The body is stubborn. It's loyal to what it already knows. Even if the old pattern is destructive, it repeats it because it's been trained that way. That's why feeling something once isn't enough. You have to sustain the new emotion long enough for it to become the new official command. The initiates knew this. They didn't practice for 5 minutes and expect miracles. They rewrote their own inner code day after day until the new pattern became automatic. Only then did the body start operating at a different rhythm. The response became natural, effortless, because the programming had already been replaced. And this raises a question few dare to ask. If the body can be reprogrammed with emotions, then what else can be changed through the same method? Is this limited to the physical? Or is there a deeper layer where the vibrational command begins to alter not just cells and behaviors, but the actual fabric of reality around you? According to the ancient initiates, the answer is bigger than you think. The mind, when sustained at a certain frequency, doesn't just alter your internal state or your physical health. It starts to organize the subtle elements of reality around you. Thoth said that the mind is the matrix of the visible world. To many, that sounds like a spiritual metaphor, but it's not. It's an energetic map, because the visible world, what you call reality, isn't something fixed, rigid, or unchangeable. It's a living network in constant motion, adjusting itself according to the vibration you emit most consistently. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a broadcasting antenna. It's sending out signals all the time, thoughts, emotions, intentions. Those signals have frequency, and frequency is form. Each kind of thought carries a specific vibrational signature. When that signature stays steady, it starts generating waves around you. Those waves touch everything: people, events, synchronicities. Everything in the field of possibilities begins to reorganize itself in harmony with the frequency you're sustaining. It's not magic. It's subtle physics. The field around you responds to your dominant vibration the same way grains of sand respond to sound waves on a metal plate. It's the principle of resonance. When your mind vibrates in coherence, reality starts to take shape. Situations that were stuck begin to move. Paths that seemed blocked open up, and people who were distant appear or disappear depending on the new vibrational order you begin to emit. That's why some people say, when a person changes on the inside, everything around them changes too. That phrase isn't motivational advice. It's a technical description of a legitimate vibrational process. But here's the crucial point. The frequency that organizes reality isn't made up of just positive thoughts or pretty phrases. It's built with emotional stability, with presence, with congruence between what you think, feel, and do. True frequency is what you live, not what you try to fake. And that's why so many fail when trying to manifest real change. Because they want the results of a new vibration, but they're still operating under the old pattern. They repeat affirmations, but don't transform the emotion behind the voice. They try to imagine a different future, but feel insecure, anxious, or unworthy. The field notices. The vibration being emitted doesn't match the spoken desire, but the silent emotion. And it's that emotion the universe responds to. That's why the ancients protected this knowledge so carefully, because they knew that if misunderstood, this technique could turn into an attempt to manipulate reality without being aligned to it, and that creates imbalance. Because you don't attract what you want, you attract what you vibrate, and the deepest vibration always wins. But what happens when you truly change that signature completely? When you stop sending mixed signals and start sustaining a clean, coherent, stable vibration. The ancients said that, at that moment, the initiate stopped being someone who reacts to the world and became someone who shapes the world. Someone who lives from the inside out, not as a temporary practice, but as a natural state. And when that state is maintained long enough, something else starts to happen. Something that couldn't be revealed outside the temples, because that was the true secret the priests protected at all costs. But even when someone reaches that state of vibrational clarity, something can still interfere. Something so subtle it almost never gets identified. It's a kind of silent sabotage that doesn't come from outside, nor from any hidden external force, but from within the mind itself. It's the invisible echo. This echo doesn't scream. It doesn't show up as an obviously negative or aggressive thought. It whispers. It's like background noise that you only notice when you pay really close attention. And the most dangerous part, it happens automatically. Most of the time, you don't even realize it's active, but the field around you feels it. This recurring unconscious thought is formed from trauma, unresolved experiences, constant criticism, patterns inherited from family or society. These aren't the ideas you chose. They're records that have built up over time. Little internal phrases like, "I'm not enough," "This won't work for me," "It's not safe to relax." No one understands me. None of them seem strong enough to cause a collapse. But the cumulative effect of these inner voices is what slowly drains all the energy you try to cultivate through conscious practices. You might meditate, repeat affirmations, practice conscious breathing, but if this echo keeps running in the background, it contaminates the foundation. It's like trying to purify river water without realizing there's poison leaking from the source. And the worst part is, the more you try to get better, the more this echo feels threatened. It was created as a protection system, an unconscious emotional armor. So when you start to change, it reacts. And sometimes that reaction shows up as fatigue, sabotage, forgetfulness, sudden discouragement. You think you're going backward, but you're not. You're just feeling the resistance of the old pattern trying to stay alive. The frequency that organizes reality might be adjusting, but if the echo of unconscious thought keeps vibrating in opposition, there's inner conflict, and conflict is noise. Where there's noise, the signal weakens, and where the signal weakens, manifestation becomes slow, distorted, or unstable. That's why the ancients placed such high importance on true silence. Not external silence, but internal silence. Because only in silence can you truly perceive what's actually being transmitted. And here's a detail almost no one teaches the right way: how to neutralize that echo without creating an internal war. A lot of people try to silence those thoughts by force, but that only strengthens them. Fighting against them is like wrestling with your own shadow. It just shifts position, but it stays present. The key, the initiates taught, was to observe the echo like you would listen to a scared child, without judgment, without rejection, just with presence. When you listen to the echo without trying to shut it down, it starts to lose power. Because what feeds it is unconscious resistance. It's the belief that this shouldn't be here that makes it stronger. But when you see it and say, "I recognize you, but I choose something else now," the pattern starts to dissolve. And it's in that moment that the true healing space opens up, not because you eliminated the thought, but because you stopped identifying with it. And from that place, a new kind of command can be issued, one that doesn't come from effort, but from clarity. One that replaces the echo with conscious intention. But how do you create that space precisely when the echo already feels like part of your identity? There's an exact technique for that, and it's not common, because it involves something almost nobody considers: the vibrational rewriting of your internal dialogue through a forgotten practice. Even if you're clear on what you want to change, if your mind is still hyperactive, it blocks any new command before it can be absorbed. It's like trying to write a new message on a chalkboard while a bunch of voices are shouting over you. No symbol sticks. Nothing gets absorbed. That's why the ancients taught that before any kind of coding, the field must be silenced. Not just the external environment, but your internal rhythm. And for that, there's an ancient technique that remains one of the most effective: the 4-4-4 breath. Simple at first glance, but deeply transformative when done with presence. You inhale for 4 seconds, hold the breath for another 4, and then exhale for 4 seconds. This cycle is repeated continuously for a few minutes, and what it does isn't just relax you, it reorganizes your nervous system. In modern terms, this practice reduces activity in the sympathetic system, responsible for alertness, defense, fight or flight, and activates the parasympathetic system, which controls states of regeneration and receptivity. Science calls this heart coherence. When the breath falls into harmonic rhythm, the heart, brain, and energetic field begin to vibrate in sync. And it's in that state that brain waves naturally drop into frequencies like alpha and theta, creating space for new vibrational programming. But the Egyptians didn't use those words. They simply said the initiate needed to become like a lake at dawn, calm, silent, and receptive. Because only in that state can the reflection of the sky be seen clearly. In practice, when you breathe in this rhythm, you're not just oxygenating the body, you're regulating your presence. You're pulling the mind out of defense mode. You're signaling to the body that it's now safe to receive something new. And it's that sense of safety that unlocks the field to absorb new coding. Without that, any attempt at visualization or manifestation becomes just mental effort. It doesn't take root. And here's the most overlooked detail by people trying to use self-healing techniques. The busy mind doesn't record. It only consumes. It spins in circles without ever diving deep. That's why this breathing isn't optional. It's the portal. It's the bridge between the automatic state and the creator state. Some ancient initiates would start with 3 cycles. Others would go up to 12 minutes before any internal practice. They knew that rushing creates noise, and noise blocks the field. You can try to speed things up, but the field doesn't lie. It only responds when you're fully present. And being fully present starts with the breath. When you breathe in rhythm, the body aligns. When the body aligns, the emotion stabilizes. When the emotion stabilizes, the mind can finally listen, and in that moment, something opens, as if the door to your inner temple unlocks. That's the exact point where the new can be planted. Because the soil is fertile, the system is receptive, the mind is finally quiet. Now you're truly ready to encode the new image. But pay attention. What you place in there cannot come from the common mind, because this is the most sensitive part of the process, the turning point. And if the image isn't encoded with the right elements, the field returns to the previous pattern. With the field clean and the mind silent, what comes next is the most sacred and powerful stage of the entire process. This is the moment when the initiate stops just studying the principles and starts creating with them. What you're about to do now isn't regular visualization. It's not daydreaming. It's not a loose desire. It's inner engineering. It's vibrational coding that starts in the invisible and echoes into the tangible. First, you'll build an image, but not just any image. It needs to have body, texture, temperature. You'll visualize your body as if it's already completely healed, but it can't be generic. It has to be detailed. If your challenge was pain, you need to see yourself moving freely. If it was anxiety, you need to see yourself breathing with ease. If it was sadness, you need to see yourself smiling, laughing, vibrating. And it's not enough to just see. You have to be inside it. As if you're living that moment right now. Feel the temperature of the environment, the texture of the floor beneath your feet, the lightness of your muscles, the sounds around you, the scent in the air. Every detail acts as a sensory anchor telling your body, this is happening now. Then comes the emotion. This is the core of the coding. The image without emotion is just an empty shape. But when you link the image with the right emotion, the field understands it as real. The emotion acts as the seal. Gratitude, relief, love, trust. Choose the one that most truly represents the state you want to live in, and then feel. Feel with your whole body. No rush, no tension. Feel like nothing else exists but that. And now the hardest part, hold it. For at least 10 minutes, you'll sustain that vibration like you're holding a lit flame in the middle of the wind. Absolute focus is the key. Don't let the scattered mind blow out the flame. Every time it tries to run, bring it back. Bring yourself back to the image, back to the emotion, back to the present. The ancients didn't call this faith. They called it coherent vibrational repetition. To them, blind faith was useless. What transformed was the sensation repeated with clarity and conviction. Today, neuroscience proves this. When the brain experiences a vivid emotion with consistent images, it releases real chemicals. The body responds as if the event is happening, and by repeating this state, new neural connections are formed. Biochemistry shifts, the immune system reacts, cell regeneration speeds up. Everything begins aligning with what was felt as true. This is vibrational neuroengineering, a fusion of ancient spiritual codes with the deepest functions of the brain and body. But here comes the inevitable question. What if, after some time, the old pattern returns? What if, even after days of practice, doubt comes back? What if fear slips in again? That doesn't mean everything is lost. But there is one decisive detail, a mechanism that can prevent all your progress from unraveling and the old pattern from silently taking over again. And this is exactly where many people lose what they've built. Because the old mind doesn't disappear immediately. It just hides. It lies in wait, waiting for the first trigger to resurface. It could be a random comment, a negative headline, a heavy environment, or even a fleeting thought that pops up while you're distracted. And without noticing, the field you had stabilized begins to fragment. That's why the initiates knew that it wasn't enough to encode a new image. You had to protect that image. You had to keep the new vibrational field intact until it fully settled into the body's structure and into reality itself. And for that, they created what they called the vibrational shield. The vibrational shield isn't physical. It's an internal response pattern, a trained reflex that prevents the old frequency from taking control again. It works in 3 layers: an anchor word, a physical gesture, and a short conscious breath. The anchor word needs to be simple, direct, and full of meaning for you. It can be something like here, whole, light, peace, real. The word itself doesn't matter, but what it represents emotionally in your field does. It should be repeated softly or mentally every time the old pattern tries to rise. It interrupts the automatic cycle. The physical gesture is the second pillar. It could be touching the center of your chest, gently pressing your fingers together, placing your hand on your abdomen. Something discreet, yet symbolic. The gesture works like a seal that activates body awareness in the moment of risk. It brings your attention back to the now. And finally, the short breath, a deep 3-second inhale followed by a longer 5-second exhale. That small adjustment in breathing rhythm signals to the nervous system that there's no threat, deactivates alert mode, and restabilizes the vibrational field. This set needs to be practiced regularly. In the first few days, you might forget, but over time, it becomes automatic. And then, when negativity tries to sneak in, the shield kicks in effortlessly. The ancients used this when leaving the temples. They knew that out there, the field was unstable, and that without this vibrational defense, everything they had cultivated internally could dissolve in minutes. The wisdom wasn't just in accessing the codes, but in protecting them until they became second nature. You can apply this shield several times a day. It doesn't take time. It doesn't require space. It's a preservation code. A way to sustain healing until it takes root, because the field needs stability to become form. And it's that stability that allows the body to finally start reacting in a permanent way. But there's still one last detail, a factor that, if overlooked, can compromise even the correct use of the shield. And it lies in the most obvious and most neglected place. That's where many stumble without realizing it. What many forget is that the body is not a machine that responds instantly to commands. It is a living field of rhythms, cycles, and gradual responses. That's why, contrary to what many people expect, true transformation doesn't happen with a snap. It develops in layers like a river carving stone, a little more each day. The body runs on natural cycles, and each one has its own response time. The densest cycle, the physical, renews every 21 days. That's the average time it takes for cells to start being replaced. The emotional field can shift in just 72 hours, as long as vibrational coherence is maintained. The mental field, in turn, is the fastest. It can realign in minutes, but it's also the most unstable. That's why so many people feel quick improvement and then fall back, because only the mental layer was touched. The body is still on a different timeline. It needs consistent support until it reorganizes. If you practice the encoded visualization daily, with the vibrational shield and conscious breathing, the first signs show up before the 21-day mark. You may notice your sleep starts to deepen. Dreams become more symbolic, more vivid. There's a subtle feeling of lightness, of presence. Sometimes the physical pain is still there, but your relationship with it changes. You no longer feel hostage to it. These are the first signs that the field has started to respond, and then something curious happens. The transformation stops being just about the body. It begins to reach something deeper, the way you see yourself. Because if you want true healing, you need to understand one essential thing. The body only responds consistently when the identity that sustains it also changes. This is the key that almost no one mentions. The biggest saboteur of healing is the unconscious attachment to pain. Even after days of practice, many people still vibrate in the role of the one who suffers. They see themselves as victims, as fragile, as broken people. That silent identity keeps the field stuck to the old pattern like an invisible magnet. You can change the symptom, but if you keep being the person with pain, the field comes back, and the body obeys. The ancients knew this. That's why one of the final stages of the process was the vibrational reversal of identity. They didn't ask, "What do you want to heal?" They asked, "Who will you be without this?" Because that question is a breaking point. It uninstalls the character that was supporting the suffering. Have you ever stopped to think about that? Who are you without this pain? Who are you without this emotional pattern? Who are you when you no longer have to hide behind the trauma? It's not a theoretical reflection. It's vibrational. It's a new field that must be felt, inhabited, and held until it becomes your new truth. And that new identity isn't built from pre-written phrases. It's born from emotion. You need to feel free before you're fully healed. You need to act like someone whole before you see the result in the mirror. You need to move like someone who's already let go of what they were carrying. Only then will the body understand this is real. And at that point, something starts to collapse. The old bonds, held in place by emotional repetition, begin to lose their grip. The previous vibrational pattern no longer finds space to fit back in. The new identity starts to take the center of the field. And when that happens, the body obeys. Reality responds. And transformation becomes inevitable. But there's still one final fragment of the teaching, a silent element that completes the cycle invisibly, and that was protected with absolute secrecy in the ancient temples. And this fragment is what ensures that everything that was activated remains. And this is the point where what was once only internal begins to project outward. When the vibrational field stabilizes, it stops being just a force of biological reorganization and becomes a silent magnet, adjusting reality itself around you. You begin to notice that certain environments no longer affect you the same way. Toxic people drift away without conflict. New connections appear unexpectedly. Situations that once felt chaotic start to resolve with less resistance. It's like life begins to breathe along with you. This isn't a coincidence. It's vibrational coherence. The personal field, when aligned with the mind and body, emits a clear energetic signature. That signature is like a radio frequency. It only connects with what vibrates in tune. When that resonance is restored, you stop attracting circumstances that reflect pain and start attracting realities that reflect balance. Thoth's initiates called this the belt of conscious attraction, a field that not only heals but organizes. It doesn't operate through effort but through presence. The purer the field, the more precise the reality it shapes. Because at the core, the outer world has always been the mirror of the inner world. But this state doesn't sustain itself. It's sensitive. That's why there's one last step, the most forgotten and the most decisive. Because up to this point, you've walked the path. You've seen the codes, felt the field, touched the invisible, but now everything depends on a single choice. Thoth was direct when he said, "The mind is both blade and balm. It wounds or heals, depending on how it's used." There is no neutrality. Every active mind is creating, and what it creates depends on conscious use. The same energy that shapes a healing reality can, if misdirected, erode everything you've built. The mind is a tool, a temple, an alchemy, but it can also be poison. And this is where many people fail. They want the secret, but not the commitment. They want healing, but won't let go of the pattern. They want the new, but keep feeding pain as identity, as unconscious attachment. And that makes everything that's been done reversible. Now you know. You know the path. You know the technique. You know the field. Nothing is hidden anymore. But that's not enough. Because true power isn't in knowing, it's in choosing. You can go back to repetition, to autopilot, to the invisible pattern that brought you here. Or you can choose to hold the new field with presence, with intention, with consistency. That choice isn't made with words. It's made every morning, with every reaction, with every thought. It's a silent decision, but vibrationally non-negotiable. And that's why this isn't the end, it's the restart. Because the field will respond, the mind will shape, and reality will simply be the reflection of the choice you make now. If you made it this far, that already says a lot about you. Not everyone is ready to access this kind of wisdom, but if you felt something during this video, a memory, a desire to change, or simply a different kind of silence inside you, share it in the comments. Write, "My mind is my temple." That way, we create a collective field, a vibrational current that recognizes and strengthens itself. And if you feel it in your heart to help this channel grow and take this message to more people, there's a space for direct support in the first pinned comment. Any support helps spread this light, this wisdom, down paths we haven't yet reached. And before you go, an important note. A special video was set aside, made specifically for those who made it this far. It's on the screen now. Click it. In there, we go even deeper, and what you'll discover might completely change the way you see life. See you in the next video. I'll be waiting for you there.